Hello, welcome back to my studio. Today I'm answering a question from one of my students about how to paint trees. And it led me on to studying the Impressionists a little closer to get some answers. Let's take a closer look. Now, Joanne sent me this photo of trees and wanted some help on how to tackle this subject. And you can see that the trees are quite a challenge in this photo. Very thin tree trunks and quite spindly as well, and branches everywhere. And then the pine needles, they look all sort of vaporous, atmospheric, quite difficult to figure out what do you paint here. Do you try and paint leaves or just blank shapes? What do you do? So I got at the Impressionist books because it reminded me of those trees, particularly of Claude Monet painting around those country scenes in France or along the Seine River. And I thought we'd get some guidance from those. And let's take a closer look at some of those pictures and see why they can be helpful to us before I jump into a little demonstration and try and put this into practice. All right, so here's the reference, and we can see the trees. These sort of thin, spindly tree trunks, lots of erratic branches, and the foliage. Now the foliage are probably pine needles or very small leaves. I'm assuming they're pine needles and they're letting some light through. But because the holes are quite small, the sky holes, the light appears to be blurred and very blue in appearance. There's a lot of blue. Look at the edges of these clusters of the pine needles. So a lot of blue and even some violet coming through over here. So this is very reminiscent of how the Impressionists painted trees like this, where they brought in blues and violets instead of just relying on dark, almost black silhouettes and then some green over it, which is not the case here. We can see green over here, but this is very backlit. You can see the light over here of the sky, where the sky holes are much bigger, letting through more light. The sky is kind of washed out, quite warm. But here, a lot of blue is evident. So we're going to have to bring that in. Cerulean blue, cobalt blue, alizarin crimson, and get that Impressionist look. But let's compare it to some of the Impressionist painters themselves. So I got out the old books. And here's Claude Monet. And we've got the situation here. Here in the shadow you can see the strong blues and even some violet coming through as well, where there's more light or warmer light, and he's used some red to get violet shapes in there. Very much broken color, broken brushwork. It's bigger strokes leading to smaller strokes over, probably wet over wet, and just building the structure up. But I'm interested in these blue colors and violets in the shadows because that's very much similar to our reference. A few other examples, once again Monet, and there's a lot of blue in the shadows, probably cobalt blue over there. And here you can see how Monet has painted these trees. Obviously direct light hitting these tree trunks, so they're not dark, but you can see on the edges a lot of blue as the light is refracting around these shapes, and he's used blue to get that impression that we saw in the reference photo. Some more examples here. This is more backlit, the light behind the trees, so darker tree trunks, but also a lot of blue to create cool greens and blues. broken brush strokes, broken color. So with that in mind, I think we can try this approach with our reference. So I'm going to start with a quick rough sketch in pencil, just keeping the pencil on the page for as long as I can and letting the organic shapes take effect. Just let it flow, get in a shadow pattern, that's quite important, and then jumping in with some cerulean blue, a little bit of white, just going to get a few background colors. Also the turquoise of the sea in the background. Now with a painting like this, where to actually begin, it's debatable. So I've decided to get the foreground out of the way and put in some color and value, leaving the white out for as long as possible and just getting the shadow pattern in and the mid-value greens, a little bit of burnt sienna for the pathway. I'm actually going to put a shadow right across the foreground and just some lemon yellow. Now into those trees, letting the brush fall across the painting surface, just twirling it in my fingers so that the brush rolls along and gets more organic shapes. Little smaller twigs, but I will paint over some of these. It's simply a guideline. So don't worry too much. Distant headland over there, and then into the sky colors behind. I've made this job harder for myself because I'm using a very small canvas to work on, actually some gessoed paper, just to demonstrate this and to really make a sketch or a study to try out this approach. So initially some violet with alizarin and cerulean blue. I'll just get in the few lighter colors here. Back in the sky now, using a round brush, and what I'm doing is just putting down color notes. You'll see building up the colors. So this is the initial block-in done, and now I can just develop those color notes of the trees a little more. Keep an eye on the darks, keep an eye on the lights, and try and get those colors in and make it colorful. A bit of turquoise, that's just cerulean and lemon yellow and white. So you can see I'm putting down smaller brush strokes in a more or less an Impressionist fashion. Now if you like the study that you do, you can then go into a large format painting and give it a lot more attention and build up those layers very much like the Impressionists would have done, because they painted fairly large paintings themselves. Here just re-establishing those darkest shadows and then the lighter blues and violets around that. I will also have to put in the tree trunks again, those that I have painted over. And let's just make up some foreground greens, getting those highlights and the thick juicy paint in the foreground before finishing off with the trees again and re-establishing some of those tree shapes. So that's more or less the Impressionist approach, or I've used them as inspiration to solve this problem. Notice the blues in the foreground just harmonizing with those in the trees as well. So creating a sort of pictorial harmony with the blue and violet colors. A few more shapes around the darks, transitioning into some sky color. Get those sky colors in the bottom part there, and then, as I said, finishing off with re-establishing some of those tree trunk shapes again, and then we're done. few tiny strokes to finish off, and a few violet and lighter violet shapes as well. Clean up a few of the lines, and that should finish it off. Well, I hope this was helpful to you, gave you a few tips, and also I think it's a reminder to look back at the old master artists. They've faced most of these problems before and they've got the answers. So get out the old books, have a look, and you may find the answer to what you're looking for. If you enjoyed the video and found it useful, please give it a like, it really does help me. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time to do that so you don't miss out any more videos. Remember, I've got a whole lot of painting courses in various mediums for beginners to advanced painters. Have a look at my website for more on those, and there's even a free course. You can find the link below. Well, that's it for this week, and happy painting. We'll see you again soon. Cheers for now.